Alright, I'm going to try to segue these two things together by saying I live in a part of the country where they still teach the Vietnam War as successful. So,
they don't even do that in Georgia.
Texas is launching, so.
yeah, it's not pronounced America, it's America. America.
I've never heard the Vietnam War called.
Well, I mean, where I'm at, really small town, there's some people who really want to be at
I've heard it.
Alright, so anyways, I'm going to open this up by saying that, just like Sam, I like a script, and by that I mean a really long, unending script that I hope you'll at least enjoy. And second, that I'm not trying to be purely informational here. You might not agree with me. You might be violently opposed to what I'm saying. But don't fight me during this speech. Alright.
Fight me after.
And now, the opening that makes no sense. Alright. In retrospect, kindergarten was a good time in my life. I had a large amount of relative freedom. I could say things like 11-teen and feel no shame, and perhaps most importantly, I only went to school for 3.5 hours a day. We covered such noble topics as learning how to write our names, counting to 100, and exploring out what I now have jokingly called primary number and primary color theory. On one particularly fun day, we first sampled classical literature, reading Aesop's The Tortoise and the Hare, a work much shorter and easier to comprehend than either The Origin of Species or Infinite Jest. There were no real grades, as it is incredibly difficult to tell a 5-year-old if he has failed. It was perhaps the greatest liberal arts education I could have asked for. Admittedly, I have not been able to remember my kindergarten's teacher's name since 2008, but the sentiment remains the same. It was the place that I began my transition to becoming fully human. The way we view the world is subjective, and we embrace that. Fast forward 12 years. We attend school for twice as long. And I've technically received 22 times more educational hours than the grades that have followed, and I do not have 22 times more educational progress to show for it. Personally, I had to relearn to write my name after my friends decided to change it this year. We still count to 100, but under my teacher's new AP number system, they tell me that anything above 65 is equal to a 5, and thus equates to a 95. I spend less time studying art. In fact, I probably knew more about Georgia O'Keeffe then than I do now. We read literature that can never contain as much moral worth as Tortoise and the Hare, but uses 100 times more pages to fail in its attempt. Or even those of us who consider perfect grades to be more important than becoming better human beings. Admittedly, that's not as bad as the fact that I want nap time more in school now than I did then, but the song remains the same. Our education has not lived to the hype that it was given in the days of my youth. I, like the rest of the rightfully disappointed world of academia, have no choice but to ask, why? The answer is not one that we exactly want to hear. Over the past 11 years, my education has transitioned from one that encourages creativity, its glory, its macro and extremes, to one that demands conformity. The purpose of the school system is to teach us how to score well on standardized tests, in a sense. In my home state, Texas, the tax tests. Other states have their own variations, such as the RCT in Georgia and the regions of New York, and of course, we have the SAT and the ACT. Each test has its own relative merits and flaws, but the reality of the entire situation is that we are learning to take exams, where the goal of the exams is to test to see what we've learned. What we often fail to recognize is that when we learn test-taking strategies, air quotes here for a reason, in school, we're cutting out other truly educational topics we could have covered. And when we grade our ability to use these test-taking strategies, we are literally pushing the real education aside in our grade system to account for whether or not we could highlight the textual evidence to prove that the word drive referred to the game of golf in context, or some other ridiculously nonsensical thing that some educator somewhere has decided is going to make us more likely to pass a test. As I once told an English teacher of mine, the answer is the same regardless of whether or not I waste your highlighter. She looked at me confusedly and just said, highlighter, I don't care. But, needless to say, the goals of our educational system are not what they used to be. One particularly striking example of this educational distortion comes from New York. This past year, an absurdist satire of Aesop's Tortoise and the Hare was used as a reading passage for an 8th grade standardized test. Those of you who know about this are laughing for a reason. In the original satire, a rabbit is challenged to a race by an eggplant. The eggplant never moves, the rabbit wins the race, and the other forest animals eat the eggplant. This is a real story. Really. The state of New York adopted the passage to change the eggplant to a pineapple, assuming that more students would know what a pineapple is than an eggplant. The state also tries to add an Aesophian moral dynamic to the story. The doctor version in the test tells the reader that the animals first backed the pineapple because they think it would never challenge a hare to a race unless it had trick up its sleeve. At that instance, an owl, I perceive this as sarcastically, says, pineapples don't have sleeves. And after the pineapple fails to move, the animals eat it. And that's literally the story. Again, like just the Aesophian moral dynamic added to it. In all caps and bold print at the very end, though, it says, moral, pineapples don't have sleeves. I don't really understand how this is moral, but the questions that get on from this are even more absurd. The first one asks which animal spoke the wisest words. And the only animal mentioned as an answer choice that speaks during the story is the owl. I mean, if you can find a test question that's more obvious to answer, as in the other answers are loaded, please tell me, because I couldn't possibly find it in my life. And the assertion that comes from this is that the reader is forced to assume that a metaphorical moral that contains no insight as to any real life issue is wise. I found it sarcastic personally, and reading some other expert analysis, I wasn't the only one. But basically, they're telling you this is the absolute answer to this because it's the only one that can, in any sense of analysis, make any sense. Another question asks why the animals ate the pineapple, despite the fact that absolutely no motives were given. The supposedly correct answer is that the animals were annoyed at the pineapple. In addition to a lack of supporting evidence, the argument can be and is made. This answer promotes violence in response to being misled by others. Another possible answer simply suggests that the animals ate the pineapple because they were hungry. Pineapples are, of course, highly nutritious and delicious fruits. And if a pineapple was sitting motionless in a forest, I wouldn't feel bad about eating it. Due to the highly controversial nature of the entire passage, all 6 questions surrounding it were thrown out. Perhaps the most important lesson that we, the confused observer of the entire spectacle, can take from this is that insistence on a logical and correct answer is the source of the problem in this case. The original goal of the story was not to provide and extend the normal constructs of literary merit, but to reject and critique them. As the original author, Daniel Pinkerton, said, it's a nonsense story, and there isn't an option for a nonsense answer. This opens up discussion on an even larger problem that this specific example shows us all too well. In the world of testing, correct is often subjective. As progressive educational theorist Deborah Meyer stated in the New York Times article, it does not really matter whether an answer is right or wrong. The right answer is one that field testing has shown to be the consensus answer of the smart kids. Effectively, modern education has come to a place of conformity at its highest value. Bear this in mind when considering any standardized test, including the SAT's critical reading and writing sections. Those who score highest are not necessarily the most inventive or creative thinkers, just those who best embody the preconceived notions of correctness. An objective score is created from a highly subjective sampling of pure conformity. Unfortunately, standardized testing is not the only area in which the collegiate realm is severely damaged. The world of college ranking is synonymous with conforming to a point in which they can no longer be considered productive. Dr. Gladwell of the New York published a Sidney Award essay entitled The Order of Things, which discusses how college rankings are inherently incapable of being objective, analyzing U.S. News and World Report rankings in particular. Its system attempts to simultaneously be heterogeneous, meaning it covers a wide variety of variables, and comprehensive, meaning it covers a wide variety of colleges. The result is that the publication can determine that the University of Texas at Austin, a public university with a total enrollment over 50,000 and a fierce hatred of the color maroon, can be tied in ranking with 4 other schools, including Yeshiva University, a private Jewish university of roughly 6,000 that is separated by gender. These 2 schools have little in common other than their shared ranking, which tells us very little about them. It is highly doubtful that students would consider both schools, as they both operate within their own distinct niches in the collegiate realm. UT Austin prides itself on being the best education for its value in the state of Texas, an extremely subjective and possibly narcissistic claim. While Yeshiva is perhaps the best distinctly Jewish university in the country, a very narrow thing. Neither intends to compete with the other, yet in the convoluted world of college rankings, they're tied. It takes a huge stretch of the imagination to understand why. The variables used by U.S. News are as follows. 1. Undergraduate academic reputation, 22.5%. Graduation and freshman retention rates, 20%. Faculty resources, 20%. Student selectivity, 15%. Financial resources, 10%. Graduation rate performance, 7.5%. And alumni giving, 5%. These factors together, as US News suggests, make up the formula for determining how good a college is. Here, the objectivity of the formula alone is in question. How can one honestly say that the single most important factor is reputation? As Gladwell wrote, some years ago, a former Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court, Thomas Bredin, sent a questionnaire to 100 or so of his fellow lawyers, asking them to rank a list of the top 10 law schools in order of quality. They included a good sample of the biggest names: Harvard, Yale, University of Michigan, and some lesser-known schools: John Marshall, Thomas Cooley, Bredin wrote. As I recall, they ranked Penn State's law right about in the middle of the pack, maybe 5th among the 10 schools listed. Of course, Penn State doesn't have a law school. The problem with terms like this is that even the most qualified voices are not informed enough to provide an accurate description of every object in which they may be assigned a value. Other factors in the equation are also flawed. Student selectivity intentionally values schools that choose not to allow students in, so that students are led to dream of schools they are unlikely to get into, and so that when acceptance letters are mailed, they're often left, well, rejected in multiple different facets of the term. Total alumni giving is entirely subjective, as only schools in which a tradition of giving has been continuous or eccentric, billionaires have gone, can be valued, whereas large public universities that receive state funding are ignored. In short, Harvard will always be first because it places these qualities, while schools like Yeshiva and UT Austin will never have the opportunity to be considered highly because they fail to conform to the subjective laws of college rankings. These factors allow a mathematically determined system of rankings to become more subjective than the test that colleges use to admit students. Ironically, if we follow the logic of the educational system as such, we arrive at a strange end. The so-called best schools seek the best conformists, rather than the best innovators, despite the fact that business and research both demand innovation. Thus, it should not be surprising that the highest ranked school on the Wall Street Journal's list of best colleges, judged solely on corporate recruiting after graduation, is Penn State, ranked 45th in the US News Report, tied with 4 other schools: the University of Illinois, UC Irvine, UT Austin, and Yeshiva. It is no understatement to say that our value system is a bit off. Understanding where we went wrong is a key to fixing the damage from derivation. Brazilian educational theorist Paulo Freire tells us the problem lies in how we learn. Our current educational norms can be summarized in his banking theory of education. Under this theory, the educational system tells its students that they know absolutely nothing, and that knowledgeable teachers are to bestow knowledge upon them, depositing it, if you will. The student is then subjected to one-sided lectures and required to memorize facts until they are considered to be knowledgeable. The problem with this approach, as Freire explains it, is projecting an absolute ignorance onto others. A characteristic of the ideology of oppression negates education and knowledge as processes of inquiry. The teacher presents himself to his students as their necessary opposite. By considering their ignorance absolute, he justifies his own existence. The students accept their ignorance as justifying the teacher's existence. The concept sustains itself by teaching us that the best student is the one that meekly accepts being filled by the educational deposits of the teacher. As a result, people are dehumanized into but storage space for information, and the distinctly human qualities of intellectual inquiry are ignored. The reason for this is simple. The interests of those who have control rest not in teaching students how to question their surroundings and change them, but in teaching them that their oppressive situation is a gift bestowed upon them. It is for this reason that political officials in Texas passed legislation to change the curriculum in order to emphasize Republican ideals in social studies textbooks, forcing students to memorize facts that will sway their political opinions. By forcing students to memorize facts that will sway their opinions, conservatives in power retain their grip. Education is, as this evidence suggests, used in a way to exert political control. It is ironic that Governor Rick Perry often cuts educational funding in the state of Texas. Changing the educational status quo that bears down upon us requires a radical reinvention of how we learn them. Rejecting the student-teacher dichotomy is the first step. Students cannot assume that they do not know, and must stop allowing their assumed ignorance to justify the existence of the dominating teacher figure. Instead, a Platonic student-teacher relationship ought to exist. Plato's dialogues show how intellectual discourse allows products and ideas to be fully explored by exposing flaws and answering criticism. The term Platonic does come from him after all. Furthermore, this process ought to serve to innovate and challenge formerly held beliefs. Free-riding thinking is discouraged in the banking system because it is powerful enough to change anything. In old intellectual discussions and dissections of the status quo led to the massively impactful celestial discoveries of Copernicus and Galileo, which challenged even the power of the almighty Catholic Church. Ultimately, logic will win so long as it takes place. Finally, we must correctly assess the role of objective standards in education. When seemingly objective ideas contain subjective motives, as they have been shown to in many different facets of the realm of academia, we must reject them. purposefully subjective thinking allows us to ask questions and develop intellectual theories on a whole matter of subjects. This thinking allows us to learn more about the world around us, as it does in high school debate, by respectfully disagreeing with each other and examining multiple sides of the contentious subject. Simultaneously, the activity teaches us to learn a lesson that no standard teacher would admit to. We are incapable of being objective thinkers. We all see the world differently, and as a result, we think differently. We can never truly be, in a sense, right. We can either choose to conform to others' opinions masquerading as correct, or we can choose to value critical thinking. It's your choice. Your smile's the biggest.
I don't know what you know, it's just really nice.
It's a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, the idea, the value system should rest more on intellectual inquiry than working towards one correct answer. And I think we can know the correct answers and still do both. And that's why, like, if we use ourselves as an example, because we have creative license to do that, we can see how it can actually work. Okay. And sorry, you totally raised your hand late.
Oh, that's fine.
I will make it.
Yeah. So I think I almost I really agree with Angie that I go to a more competitive high school.
Yeah.
So for me, it's definitely, it would be hard for us. It would be very frustrating if there wasn't like this for us to be separated from the rest of the other high schools. Because unlike many people here, I'm not valedictorian, I'm not salutatorian, and it's not because I'm a complete slacker. It's just because that's the nature of my school. And so I think most of us are in agreement. Standardized testing is necessary. So is there something different about the SAT in particular you would do? To make it more open to what you want?
I would say the SAT is definitely not the worst. I think the problem comes in some of the lower level things, and then the manifestations of we're going to continually learn the right answer are already in line.
Right.
You have to say we're both Texas kids, and you know how messed up the tax test is.
Yeah.
Sure, it's horrible. I mean, like the Excel level exam, I probably could have passed when I was in 5th grade. It's a joke. But I think the SAT is not the worst because the math section is the math section. And the critical reading, the vocabulary section, it's pretty objective. Some of the analysis of the literary stuff, it's a bit subjective, as is the AP English exams and their multiple choice. It's a bit subjective, but I guess some subjectivity there, we kind of just deal with it. Even though it's not necessarily perfect, just deal with it. All right.
Okay, kind of going off of both what Angie and Michael said. I know we just talked about standardized testing as in objective analysis in high school, but this idea that we're all kind of aiming for the same goal and that they're training us all to kind of conform. I definitely agree that creativity should be encouraged and freedom of expression is a good thing and being subjective is a good thing. But if we're trying, essentially the purpose of school and education is to prepare us for the real world, right? And to train us to kind of learn how to make our way and be successful, however we define successful, to give us the tools to be successful. And if we all learn on such a subjective level, I guess, and if we aren't objective in the way they train us, and if we don't all have some kind of baseline, how are we supposed to interact with each other? Because you need some kind of objective baseline.
I think what I'm saying is missing within the system is the sort of critical thinking skills that you can't really test so but doesn't need to be taught. I had a piece on success, but I cut it out. Basically, the idea is it's a lot of Orestes Freiere's ideas on education, and he's considered one of the more influential educational theorists of the 20th century. But the whole idea is if our education system teaches us that we just have to be quiet and listen and accept what our teachers say, then the pathway to success is by doing what has already been done. But our definitions of success in society are through innovation and changing and advances in medicine, breaking through the ideas of theoretical physics, making a new concept rap album or whatever that's never been done before. It's a lot based on things that have not yet been done, because you're not going to be paid to do things that someone's already done. So the way we get to success and our definitions of success don't exactly align.
If we're going to do that fake rap artist who wants to find a cure for cancer or so infinitesimal,
Oh, I know.
In that sense, so they're training us to be.
I'm being idealistic here, of course. I understand what you're saying, though, that we do have to have some sort of basis. But I think that whenever you're teaching a test rather than teaching a course, it's not the same. And I think that's what I'm trying to say here, is teach the course. Teach me calculus, don't teach me how to pass the calculus exam. Because, there's teach calculus, it's just like, teach it. Alright, so,
I'm sort of building on what Shri said. A lot of you probably heard this from me. One of my favorite sayings is something that my econ teacher always used to say: someone needs to sell car insurance to the guy who just cured cancer. In other words, like, we can't all be those visionaries who are moving society forward. So I guess really what I'm interested in exploring is, in your ideal world, like, what is the dichotomy between like learning something in an organized fashion, exploring it via intellectual inquiry, like where will one end and the other begin? Because like we know, like the deepest analytical thinking skills don't really appear till adolescence. So how would you encourage free thought among elementary school children while teaching them at the same time to not like be completely free spirited, like teaching them how to be responsible members of society?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to first deal with none. There's a way to teach them to be a better car insurance salesman than he already is. And if you're just the robotic car insurance salesman that knocks on doors and just gives them the offer sheet, you're going to get your sent in the face quite often. There's a science to even selling car insurance. That's why there are things like business school or whatever else. I mean, car insurance is a wonderful example here because it's so fun. There's a reason that in the state of Texas, the tax test starts at 3rd grade. It's because before then, the teachers get licensed to teach the kids the basics of whatever they need to do. And they are teaching a course, but they can't teach a test because, you can't like break a kid's spirit by telling them that you failed a test at that age. You're still teaching them, there's still the whole idea of, we're working towards things like, basic math or like spelling, stuff like that. Because you don't need to be teaching them like how to like critically analyze Aristotle at the age of 10. Though I'm sure someone's tried. The idea of some like more, I think I like to keep coming back to teach the course rather than teach the test. Because that's always what's been the focus of my, if you will, hatred towards my school district, is that they've always just taught the test.
I just have a comment. I went to lower school till 8th grade, which is like the middle standard part of it, and so this educational theory where I didn't take grades, I didn't take standardized tests. Like it was really like art based and just a bunch of like it was like free spirits like in school or whatever. And then high school I go to university high school, which is really competitive public school. I take tests all the time. And I think the dichotomy is really interesting because I was never like there's this like educational theory that you need to teach the test at a young age, but I didn't do that and I'm fine. Like I think that my critical thinking skills, my ability to learn were really developed as a child and I didn't really learn much fact, and now I can apply that and learn things to be easier. So I just think that's interesting. I have whatever thinking is important.
Sorry.
Jesse.
Bullets.
Do you want to bullet?
Yeah, I'll go back to you later.
Yeah.
Horrible person. No.
I don't want to, get whatever you said wrong or take whatever part of your speech the wrong way. But I think something should definitely be said for teachers, and that I don't kind of buy this idea that they assume this kind of this role as giver of knowledge, and to an ignorant kind of empty vessel of a child. Because I feel like I came from a public school district almost all my life, and standardized testing has been a major part of it, and teachers are pressured to make sure that we get good scores on these standardized tests, because otherwise, budget cuts and stuff like that, it's a necessity, and it's not their fault. And I think, too, that teachers also have a huge role in encouraging creative thought, even in terms of elementary school, because I've been through that, and despite, not a bad, but kind of less affluent public school district, there are many teachers in all over America that encourage that creative thought that you say is not necessarily.
I mean, there are those who go above and beyond. I have a lot of friends who want to be teachers and will, as I always say, they're going to be the most successful people who graduate from my high school, not because they'll make the most money, but because they'll actually do the most of their lives. Because I have two friends who want to become theater teachers, and they are like going to change people. I mean, people do go above and beyond, but the circumstances that you're placed in, and a lot of what Freire talks about in terms of circumstances, like the teacher isn't inherently evil. They're a product of the system that's like not necessarily the best. You know, they go above and beyond, but it's a personal choice that they choose to in the system. And like the framework of what like curriculums tell us to do and all that doesn't like necessarily fit in there all too well. They'll often make it part of their own initiative. But I definitely agree with you about how all that stuff works, you know.
Yeah, the system should definitely realize that teachers are there.
Yeah, that's, I don't think you really misconstrued anything saying that. Right. So, yeah. Very nice. Go for it. You seem pretty keen.
I guess I have two questions. From the first, I just think easier one is to answer would be from like a pragmatic point of view, isn't it kind of difficult to say like you should rely on the Platonic ideal for teaching kids? That requires like a very small class and like a very dedicated teacher. And I think there's a lot of constraints, especially if you go to a public school like mine. We have like 2,400 kids there. And we really apply a Platonic ideal to a lot of classes. And I guess my second question is on you, like, in the feeling I got from Pubspeak is that you are kind of opposed to a lot of the criterion that universities use to accept kids, like Harvard, you said, accepts the most conformists and stuff. And I agree with you to a certain degree, but at the same time I want to ask, like, I'm frequently told by my friends that there is no point in critiquing something you can present an alternative.
Oh,
Can you present a separate set of
that is a very important statement because that's the number one way to make someone work really speaking debate. They're just randomly railing and stuff and they don't have any first. So I think I'm actually going to go with the critiquing thing first. And then I'll move on to this, like the how can we work a Platonic thing, because like first and foremost, the idea is that we have to be able to institute a curriculum in which like the idea. I mean, I'm okay with. Your score on your math test is your score on your math test, and your score on your spelling test is your score on your spelling test. And you can write an essay and all that sort of stuff. But if you're working towards this is how the state wants you to write your essay, and if one of the running jokes in the state of Texas is if you include rape or murder in your narrative essay, you'll get a perfect score. Because no, it's really horrible. But like if you convey any sort of emotion and don't just basically say that I once went to the park and there was a cute puppy there and that was like basically as long as you can do there is like set stuff you can do. And that's like part of the problem. I mean there's definitely things that work. I have a social studies teacher, which I had last year and I will have next year. And we have like 30 people classes and their discussions. Like literally we all just this form of lecturing is like it's literally a large discussion group. And it's probably the most successful class in our school because he's not just like lecturing on and on and on, like forcing down material down the throat and memorize it. He's like, so what do you think about this? Randomly calls on a kid who's just sitting in the corner, randomly calls on a girl who never talks, doesn't call on me, doesn't call on me, doesn't call on me, and tell them no one else will speak. But the alternative is often just teach and ask. Don't ask to repeat, ask to analyze, or ask what people think, I guess. And yeah, I realize it's really hard because like not necessarily all teachers are really dedicated in some senses, but there are some who are really awesome. And not necessarily all schools are set up to like necessarily have the funding. But I mean, I realize that we're dealing with a highly theoretical thing, that we are all idealists and that, the world's messed up and that we think there are ways to fix it, but not even ways to fix it are perfect. I'm just saying here's the things that we need to look forward to fixing. Here's a brief way that I think we could do better, but I'm not the ultimate authority on it. But I do know that these things definitely need to be fixed. Alright.
Just to build on what everybody else has already said.
Speak up.
Speak
Just
out.
to build on what everybody else has already said, I think that this is a really unpleasant way to approach things, but I'm wondering, and correct me if I'm wrong, definitely, but for a lot of us, especially the ones that go to a lot of public high schools where small classes were like that small critical mass like the learning, about literature and about everything else that you're interested in outside of school on your own mission. And so I'm wondering, just by merit of our population and the practicality of things, what do you or anybody else in this room think? Like, do you think that to some extent it's your own responsibility to explore beyond what the school can go on with doing? Or is it the responsibility of the school? Like, should we just definitely push it, like, everything should go back to them, that it's their responsibility to try to teach?
If you want to, you should, and I think we do. And I'm interested, and I feel underexposed because there are people in here who make me feel, who seem like they've read everything or know a little bit about so much literature that it's astounding. And I know it's not because it's not on their curriculum per se. I'm not just looking at, I think I'm not looking at you in particular, but I think you are well read, and I think you've told me that like you do it on your own. I know that there's other people in here. I just think you're the first example of thing that I'm using that's going to not like that. No, but like I think jointly, yeah, if you want to learn. And should schools try to do more? I think there's a balance in terms of like what can we do without leaving people in the dust and without losing interest. And there's horrible factors we have to consider. It's a broken system. And this is a really bleak topic to talk about. I kind of chose it because I knew that we all think about our schools a lot, and we're all going to have some very pointed opinions. And I didn't want to have something that was blasé and agreeable, because I think that
Sorry, I just wanted to say, for something that Mr. Sam, like, I feel like a lot of us are posing pretty different questions in terms of practicality, and that, at least personally, I'm not attacking your idealism, and I think that some of these things are more like thoroughly better researched rather than just come up with a solution on the spot.
Yeah.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Leading us like easy, like having something about that, like reading outside of class and doing on your own terms. I think that for a lot of it is like, I know that I'm very privileged and very fortunate as a person, but because a lot of it doesn't have to do with economic status. Like, if you have to have a job outside of school, like, how do you have time to go not you specifically, but like anyone has to have a job. Like, if you're born into poverty, it's gonna be harder for you. And if you're born into a situation that isn't conducive to that, like if your parents don't necessarily, they can't necessarily help you perform when you're young. Like, if you don't have that, it's a slippery slope, and I don't think that we can necessarily depend on students learning outside of the classroom, because everyone should have a fair shot. And not the only way, but I think the best way we know how to do it is through education. And we should figure it out as some people to do it on their own.
Say I work like 20 hours a week, and it has totally killed my ability to do a bunch of stuff outside of the class, and has like actually shot my GPA down considerably. It sucks. I know you're very close down with this.
I like this one for that, what she said.
Sure.
Like, my first was speaking English, I had to learn at
Expletive factory.
I was seriously working at a factory, and yeah, and I was actually born. I was born in poverty and like pretty economically disadvantaged. But I still find time to engage in like intellectual activities, as you might call it. But going back to what Pooch said, I think it's more like an individual motivation set. Like, I mean, I do agree that for like economically disadvantaged kids, it's harder for them to like find opportunities to learn because they don't have like access to like public libraries or sources of intellectual motivation. I just think it's like more of a personal thing. Like, if you have the motivation, you're gonna have like this kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I mean, those of us who fill up our time with lots of stuff, we have our own problems, but like, there are kids who just don't do anything and have like absolutely no motivation whatsoever. And it's not necessarily that they're disadvantaged, it's just that they don't care at all. And you have to consider them into the factor as well, not just like the disadvantaged who are like having to do stuff outside the
I
class.
like one sentence there.
Go for it.
That might not be their fault.
Yeah, I know.
It's not their fault.
No,
That's not what I'm saying here, but it's more the fact when you, I mean, like, even if you're economically disadvantaged, like, you do have
not saying this anymore. So stuff happens.
I guess the question is like, sorry.
We wanna go like.
Should we penalize people who don't care?
Should we? I think people who truly don't care are in a sense penalizing themselves. I mean, like, if you're placed in a circumstance, yeah, let's say, no, I think it's like people who just don't put forth any effort in the classroom whatsoever. Like, if you walk into the class completely stoned, and you, I mean, like, can you, yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, there's, I think those sort of circumstances, they're penalizing themselves, and I don't really know how to go from beyond that. Okay, look, who else has, I'm going around this way, so who else wants to say something? I'll go, Will.
I don't want to like drag this on, but I just went to an international school this past year, so I thought maybe I could offer up a few perspectives on other teaching systems. In India, there's a program called there is at the IB, yes, that's what I meant, but there's also the ITT, the Indian, IIT, sorry, Indian Institutes of Technology. They administer a test to thousands of students every year, and it's something like, it's certainly less than 1 in 100 gets in, and it's on the basis of their score on one test. And that's generally the rule for every large university in India. And that's also the case for a lot of other Eastern education systems. And so in perspective, the fact that we even have, and also in Britain, which we think of as more like on par with us in terms of development and Western educational philosophy, they don't have recommendations from teachers, for example, when they apply to colleges. And generally the British students who come to our international school are awful in terms of math and are reasonably okay in terms of writing and reading, but nothing special. The Scandinavians are, Finland does very well on internationally. Students are not exceptional at our school. So, and Korea does exceptionally well, but the Korean students that I know, the South Koreans, I don't know when they're Koreans, unfortunately, are working about 10 hours a day in school and then do about 5 hours after school and then go to bed and then wake up. So I just want to give you some perspective, like the other 2 Americans in my year are, the 3 of us are 3 of the strongest academically at the school. And I subscribe to this like fairly tired idea that the American education system is a broken one. And I do agree with a lot of the points you made, but I also think that a lot of the points you made are things that have been repeated over and over again to the point that they don't get questioned. And that's something that concerns me. It's sort of ironic because that's sort of what our education system should be teaching us to do, is to question, right? I just thought I would offer that up. Don't totally discount what we learned, because even though we could do so much more in the time that we often waste, we are doing a lot more than a lot of other people.
You wouldn't be wrong in saying it's less broken than it is not.
Just to add to that really quick thing in China, it's just because of the sheer number of students that apply to university every year, they are forced to adopt a very, very efficient and harmless system, in that you're basically all 18 years of your life you're studying just one test, and it's the longest welcome. Like it literally and then like universities don't even look at essays, don't even talk about like anything personal, like they know your name basically as a number, and that's the score that you receive. And they don't even care basically about who you are as an individual. You pass the line, you're in tier 1. You pass the second line, you're in tier 2 kind of thing.
I wanted to say one more thing about Scandinavia. Sorry. The one thing that I love about the Scandinavians who have come specifically by the people who select them to be certain not to get anywhere above like 38 out of the IB.
It's out of
Because-
42, massively.
Because they're out of 42, yeah, sorry. And a lot of people don't know what that means, but the point is that they are encouraged to take advantage of everything else that the school has to offer and to put academics on the back burner, and that's a reflection of the culture there. So when I say that they're not equipped to deal with our education, it's not as though they're not equipped to deal with.
It's a value system sort of thing.
Right, and there's no Harvard in Scandinavia. There's just a bunch of schools that are about equal, and you go there and you get a reasonably good education for whatever it is that you want to do, and then you move on. So, and these people don't do work outside of school. So that's like another model. On the one hand, we can be grateful for the skills that we do have. On the other hand, maybe that does make more sense. But, sorry, I wanted to round that out. Sorry.
I think maybe we're projecting a tiny bit because we don't like the things that we see in the school system that we receive, but I don't think that you can't make a school system that we would approve of that can work now. I don't think that's the case. And I think that maybe we're also projecting our values on a lot of people. Right now, the people that go to college, this figure's tossed around a lot when you talk about like there was that Senator Obama moment when they were debating college and stuff. But 1/3 of people that receive a bachelor's degree go to jobs where they do not require any form of college education. And colleges in America at least value personality, right? And they value vivid diversity and all of these things. But that doesn't really count for much in the workplace where most people will go to work. You know, it doesn't matter that you're a gorgeous person and have a great personality. It kind of matters what you do. And I think that, you know, it helps to be intellectually personally attractive, but on a certain level, like it's great now because we're all flattered so much for being vivid and diverse and intellectual. But at the level where it matters, where people do things, you know, not everyone's going to be an astronaut, not everyone's going to be even a car insurance salesman, right? And I think that it's important that we consider that and teach people to do things in that sort of sense. But, you know, it could also be suck less for us.
I mean, I think that we're definitely agreeing with each other a lot. And I think everyone's bringing up a sort of like critique, a continuously critique thing. It's kind of cool. But, you know, I think we definitely have to say that.
Okay, so I kind of wanted to go back to what Christine and Katie brought up, kind of about, I guess, economically disadvantaged students. Like, there are certain students that do have motivation to like seek out natural resources, but I feel like those are the students that like find a lot of intrinsic value in like learning and knowledge, and I feel like there are a lot of students who like don't have that feeling but can be taught to value knowledge and intellectualism to a certain extent. And I think that, like personally, I think that the like government and like communities have a large role in helping students get to the point where they feel compelled to learn and seek knowledge and be curious and care about their education. So I think that we need like a better system of making learning and academics and just like general pursuit of you know, forming ourselves as like well-rounded humans compelling for everyone, because I think everybody deserves it.
Part of the problem is that we're not giving people reasons to be interested so much.
Right, that's kind
You know,
of
so increasing exclusivity and then trying to like, or maybe just like not all. I feel like I'll go for example, that there's this strange middle ground of students in my school. There's the kids who take the AP classes, there's the kids who barely pass the regular classes, and then there's the kids who aren't motivated enough to go into the AP and like challenge themselves, but are like definitely missing out. And I guess it's not a perfect example because I understand what you mean when you say that there are students who definitely could get a lot more out of the educational system if they had more motivation.
Right.
Not just from inside themselves.
Right, and I think our society has a really big role in making that drive for success.
So I guess what I was gonna say is that I know that like there are definitely some people here who are privileged enough to go to like magnet schools or private schools where like there is definitely like an intellectual culture, and I mean that's amazing. But I think I don't think I'm in favor of standardized testing, but in defense of standardized testing, like you mock the Texas high school exit exam, there are kids who can't pass that in 12th grade. There are 8th graders who read at a second grade level. And I think that while it's like really great to talk about how, you know, we should value, I don't know, I think like discussion and learning, and like you say like teach the course. I think, you know, at this level, I think Joseph definitely touched on this. At this level, I think we all value that, but at the same time, like there's a huge, like the word is like, yeah, I mean there's a huge like socioeconomic achievement gap, and we can't. I think it's impractical to eliminate standards because there are kids who they can't read. They can't do math, and while we may find the test like ridiculously easy and boring and not a true measure of our intelligence, there has to be some standard in education.
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that's rubbed me wrong, and not from seeing my own how it's affected me, but how it's affected my classmates, especially at the very beginning of these tax tests, is that my school district put so much time into teaching test strategies. They failed to teach anything worthwhile, and there were kids who would come to teachers, and this is similar to that example. There was this kid in my 3rd grade class. He came to my teacher, he's like, hey, I'm still having a whole lot of trouble like answering the question because I don't know. She's like, where's the evidence? She's like, I don't know what I'm looking for. And I think I remember that sticks out in my mind because like we just spent like a week going through. Here's how you like find the evidence and answer the stuff. I feel like we didn't have the ability to because the problem was that we were assessing we weren't trying to answer the right problem. You know, it's like trying to cheat ourselves way through these systems. And if you're going to actually want for the problem, I mean, I definitely agree with you, and I know that it's not like we need to look at these standardized tests as like too easy. We need to make them harder. No, we need to like get more out of the system. And I definitely agree that there's a big socioeconomic gap, and that fixing that just like would definitely be almost more important than like fixing it for the higher people. Like let's fix it. It doesn't really. It's really not that bad if you're like, oh no, my school wasn't as good, so I didn't learn how to get into Harvard, so I'll go to Dartmouth. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Like if you have to have standards, how do you evaluate them? You know, other than.
I think it's not changed. I think it's changed the standards. And like, I mean, it shouldn't be like. I really don't think it's like necessarily like. If you're going to test basic reading ability to make sure that it's actually being taught, then you shouldn't like penalize the student. You should like give more incentives for the school to teach it to them, I suppose. Because there's not a lot of incentive to like teach at some of these basic levels. I don't know. I really don't know. And I think you're posing like a great problem of ours that I don't have the perspective to personally be able to solve. I just have the perspective to see that it's not right. And because I've experienced it personally, but I'm not one of those students. And unfortunately, we all do see the world different things. And I don't have the perspective.
Because I think that standardized testing.
Okay. Definitely. We've been going on for a while.
Yeah, but my question's going to open up like a whole can of worms.
I know, and I'm ready.
Okay, first of all, I think I'd speak for everyone in saying that we're not trying to like attack your speech.
Oh, I know. I
Okay,
don't
just-
take
I
anything. I don't take
wanna
anything
make sure you're
personally.
not getting that.
No, I prefer you to. I prefer you to like break through everything you can because that's like actually provides.
Okay. I really like what Sri said earlier, that the purpose of an education is to prepare us for the real world. And there are obviously lots of components of the real world, two of which stand out as immediately obvious, are that our real world as it exists today is essentially drowning in information.
Yes.
Secondly, most of the people will become, will enter jobs more like car salesmen, or car insurance salesmen, or file clerks than astronomers or astronauts. Meaning lots of people will have to deal with very, very boring jobs for much of their lives. So the question is, how should education teach us how to deal with lots of information, which basically boils down to teaching us how and not what to determine what to pay attention to.
Everything is important.
Yes. And then secondly, how to deal with very boring and frustrating crap, which I think we might agree the system does well. I read an article Joseph showed me that the other day that argued that the way they teach physics in college is intentionally difficult because what they're trying to teach through the physics class is not the physics itself strictly, but how to work hard on a frustrating problem. Why are you playing each other?
We continue.
Okay. So I guess I would ask you guys, maybe the school system is doing the second part well. How might it go about teaching us how to filter experience in an appropriate way?
Thank you, David.
I don't know. In terms of teaching us how to do the early indicators jobs.
Also, I'd like to say that was, I think, close to one of the things Corey was getting at in his Pubspeak. That's one of the things that made me think of that.
Alright. Well, okay. I think I'd like to give my answer, and then we could technically adjourn, and then we can continue this informal because I know it will. But yeah, it's probably 6 days, that's a while. I could say, first of all, with the minutia, like the jobs that don't exactly require us to know how star works or all that stuff that I don't know. I think that there's definitely just a better way of going about it. I mean, the better you know English and can communicate, you're still going to be able to do, but there's certain skills that are universal.
Right.
And so we should be able to teach those more effectively.
And there is, I'm sure everybody else in this room has heard lots of people complain, I'm never going to use this in my real job. Why are we learning it?
Yeah, there's so much universal.
What's the answer to that? Because I think there is one, but why? What is it? That's an important question, I think.
I guess,
What is life?
so like, I guess, really quickly, I really dislike calculus, and I hopefully will not use it
But
in my
have you
real life.
learned that you don't want to do it for the rest of your life?
Yeah, but my parents, they're like, like, it teaches you a way of thinking, a logical, mathematical way of thinking, and like, now that I think about it, yeah, I suffered through calculus, but like, I did gain different perspectives.
Yeah, and I mean, I think
filtering
it's,
information, like what you were saying.
yeah, I think what Angie just said is basically what, in a different form, what Corey was saying was speak about a liberal arts education. The metaphor I thought of was that a liberal arts education is basically like weightlifting, in that it doesn't really matter what you're using to flex your muscles. It just matters that you're strengthening that muscle that is your head.
Hard for that metaphor.
And an extension of that metaphor would be that our current education system may well be like berry picking, in that we're trying to accumulate as many facts as possible into a bucket. I just wonder, is that what we should be doing?
I think this is a conversation we need to continue.
Okay.
Can I just
We can stay for a second, please.
This is okay, 5 seconds. Hey, I think I'd just like to say that regardless of how many different questions and things we just pointed out, We just did that in the method which I said we should have done it in my Pubspeak. So yeah.
We're all gonna be okay.